Yo, hey everyone, Brian with you from TheGameCommon, and we are playing some more Planet Coasters. So, as I mentioned in the last episode, we are back in the witch area, and essentially I decided it was probably time for us to go ahead and start making a queue path, and actually maybe open our coasters up to some people. So, at first I tried doing the queue down to the ground and going around there, and then eventually I was like, you know what would be better? Let's actually have a queue going in the air, and then actually go around the tree like that, because I think that's kind of a neat little, just kind of view as you're walking through it. And you know, I don't think I got a picture of that. No, I don't think I had anyone actually waiting in the queue there at the end. But at the end of this episode, we're gonna have some real-time just kind of like looks at the park, at least thus far, and just kind of like show you guys what I've done in real time, and you know, kind of show you what it's like from the people's point of view. So essentially here I had to tunnel down into the ground just to kind of well, get the queue around, or well, get the exit around the roller coaster. So we end up adding a bunch of rocks here, which once again, huge fan of this. I think this came out really good. I think this is just kind of a nice little pretty area, and I think once again it just kind of sets this all off. One thing you'll notice we end up doing a lot in this episode is we add in a whole freaking butt ton of bushes and stuff like that, because I mean, still, it's just so thin for a forest. Like, I mean, like, look at how much clear grass you can see right now. It's just it's annoying me because, you know, I want there to be leaves, I want there to be foliage, I want there just to be random crap on the ground. So really liked how that looked. I didn't really like how the water kind of merged and kind of like met the ground there. I didn't think it looked all that great. Maybe I could have done some rocks, some dirt wouldn't have been a bad idea. So once again, we just add in some plants here just to make it look a little more realistic. And then there was a little bit of a hole there, so once again, just adding in rocks. Like, if there's one thing you want to do to make something look good, I think in this game, add some rocks around it. I think that's one of the best things you can do. And then once again, it's just like around the witch area, it's just like so much green. I don't want to see this much grass. So it's like, I guess I'm just going to add all these freaking things in, and maybe I could do them a little more sporadically, but I don't know. I just don't think they look good just sporadically, so that's why I end up adding a whole bunch of just random bushes and stuff like that. And you can see I start using these bigger green bushes, and we start using those a lot just to start blocking view, so you can't see in the distance and see how much just wide open space there is. Because, like, if you're looking at the tree line, it looks like a forest. If you're looking through underneath, it doesn't look like a forest. So that's why I'm trying to block as much of the sight line as possible now. Here we're just doing a little bit of sand essentially just to make it look like it's a path that people have walked through, and then once again just blocking sight lines. That's kind of I think the theme of this episode is block the sight lines. Maybe that's why I should name it. Once again, the witch's towers just don't really look good unless there's I think the weird bushes around it, the kind of prickly the pokey bushes. So that's why we end up adding a whole bunch of them in. And then once again just blocking those sight lines, because like look at how plain and yuck that looks. So we're just going through adding it and blocking the sight line, and I'm just kind of like looking from when I'm flying through, I'm just kind of like looking to the pathway, deciding what we want to do. And so here we go. Here we're finally adding our first ride in. I ended up noticing that we have this witch's ride here, which, you know, I think it's kind of fitting for the witch area to have a witch ride, so I decided to put it right here next to the coaster, so when you're flying through the coaster, you can actually see it, and vice versa, when you're on the ride, you can actually see the coaster, and then vice versa as well with the queues. The idea was just going to kind of show it up and just, you know, kind of see what's going on. So first thing we do, which is a little unusual for us, is we actually added in the queues, which I think was actually a really good idea, because it's from there that I ended up adding a bunch of other stuff, and I think that turned out to be a really good idea. So our pathway is a little too long. I wanted to take it as far that way as possible, but just at that point I couldn't queue it around, so we end up curving around and then end up connecting there, just trying to get it as long as possible. And then over here we essentially just connect that and go all the way back to the entrance, and I actually like that pathway there. I liked how that looked, and so we once again put some trees around it as close as possible just to kind of fill it up. I decided instead of moving some of those trees just to add more trees, but we kind of had to use the X because, you know, the X move tool, just to make sure that they line up properly with the ground and they're not crooked, and get them as close to the the ride as possible. And then here we're actually adding in the wrong trees, and this is where I discovered, oh, whoops, it's not the alpine trees, it's like the bipolar trees or something like that. The other thing to note, and I mentioned last episode, we changed the roller coaster a little bit after this episode. You'll see some fly-throughs and stuff near the end. I ended up getting rid of a lot of the trees that were actually, not a lot, but I ended up getting rid of a couple of the trees that were kind of whacking you in the face as you were flying through the roller coaster. And I actually did it to open up sight lines a little bit on our witch's hut that are up on the hill, and I think it worked out really, really well. So once again, we ended up adding some rocks there because it was just like this kind of ugly area. So kind of going with that theme, hey, if it's ugly, let's add some rocks. And then I added the bush here's, but we start doing something different here. At some point, I start adding in buildings and build kind of the structure in. Here, I'm still just blocking off sight lines as much as possible. And it's just like, I'm just flying through here going like, man, this is just so simplistic. I just don't like it. Oh, yeah. And so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to add building pieces to this, but for whatever reason, I couldn't do it. And so what essentially I figured out you have to do is you have to actually build separately. You can't build on top of the ride, at least from my understanding. You have to build your structure separately, and then you can add it to the ride afterwards, which is what then we decided to do. So that's why there was a little cut there, because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so we end up going with castle walls here. And so I guess our lore is going to be kind of the fact that, like, we have a castle, or maybe there was a castle at some point that got taken over by the witches, and now this is like the witch castle. I suppose that's going to be kind of our lore here. And now the witches control the castle, which is right near their forest. You know, I mean, Planet Coaster, if this was actually an amusement park, obviously there would be some sort of theme, and it would be like, into the witch's domain. And maybe that's what we should do. We should actually have a sign past our kind of friendly tree that we have right at the corner. And then this whole area, we just call like Witch's Domain. I hadn't named any of the rides yet. I probably should like look to you guys for names. I'm terrible at names. What would we call it? I mean, I like the idea of calling this whole area like the Witch's Domain, and I might actually end up doing that, but we kind of got to decide rides at some point. And here I'm basically just adding in walls, because once again, it's just like I'm trying to eliminate sight lines as much as possible, because it's like there's just, you can just see too much just, green and stuff like that, especially when you're on the ride. So I just keep adding more and more things just to get rid of the sight lines. Here I'm trying to add in some dirt or something to make it look a little more realistic, so it goes with the walls. Eventually we decide that these walls are actually facing the wrong direction, and we flip them all around, and then we end up doing the concrete in here, because I realized, wait a second, those are all facing the other direction. So like this is the inside of the castle, and this is the outside of the castle. So then I was like, wait a second, we got to put grass back here, because this is the outside of the castle. And then, man, that's a little fast. Sorry about that. And then we end up adding the concrete in here. Once again, really no good thing here to make it look right. Here we end up adding just a few more walls in. We're just trying to get it to like get walls over here, but like obviously with the coaster there, we were very limited in like what we can actually put over here. So, you know, it looks okay. It's not super great. I could go rebuild the coaster and stuff like that to make it more perfection, but like, I think it's okay. Because once again, it's just like, it's just adding to the sight lines, and I think it's okay. I say okay, I actually think this area came out really well. So what else do we end up adding through here? We add a little bit more to the pathway, because it looks just a little plain there. I don't want to go the pathway all the way through, but it is what it is. And then we start adding just some lamps and just some random gear and crap like that, just to make this look a little more realistic. Now those torches actually turn on, right? We'll have to pay attention when we actually do the fly through here in a little bit, that the lamps actually turn on. I think so. And here I'm trying to adjust it, but I can't. Like, I'm trying to move it, but it won't let me change the grid. So I just end up keeping it as is. I probably could have built another piece and fixed it that way, but I was just like, And I really don't like those flags. I think they probably fly in the wind, but I just didn't really like how they looked. By the way, that torch is crooked. I fixed it at some point, so don't you worry. We ended up throwing that cat little shield there, but then I found the witch shield, and I was like, yeah, we need the witch shield. And then we need the tree shield, because, like, what's the whole point of it? Well, the knights and everything weren't really too, how should I say it, too on par. Like, they were chopping down the forest and doing stuff like that, so the witches eventually scared them and killed them and moved them off and now have taken control of the castle. And so you, as the rider, are tasked with going into the castle and surviving the witch's wrath in order to bring civilization back to the forest. I don't know. That's the best I can come up with for now off the top of my head. You know, we didn't actually close in those walls. I might actually go back and do that as well, because it's not like those walls are that far away from each other. I should just close in that hole right there. Yeah, I think I'm actually going to go do that here in a second. The other thing we end up doing, well, you can see I start adding the things in here, but I was like, I don't really want to save a blueprint without all the trees and stuff like that, so the only other thing we end up doing here in a second is the witch is actually faced in the wrong direction, so I end up rotating her. But I do that off camera. And I think here, yeah, we're actually ready. Okay, so we're going to pop into this stuff live, and I hope you guys enjoy everything we've done thus far.
Smushing the kapıcı.